Welcome back to the Evolving Hunter podcast, where we talk with hunters, educators, conservation leaders, and everyday outdoors people about what it means to keep learning, keep improving, and keep showing up the right way. Whether you're brand new to hunting or still figuring it out, this show is about growing as hunters, sharing the lessons, and keeping the heritage moving forward. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the Evolving Hunter podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today on our episode, we have Scott Petrie. He is the CEO of Pass It On Outdoor Mentors. Very excited to have a conversation about Pass It On and the good work that they're doing. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me, Jay. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So typically we kick episodes off with like a Q&A segment from listeners. Today, I think we're going to hold off on that. I want to kind of dedicate the full podcast to having a conversation about Pass It On and kind of exploring the opportunities that they bring to novice hunters in our space. So I kind of kick it off. So we're going to kind of open the floor for you, Scott, to give yourself an introduction, who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. I guess I moved around a lot. I was lucky. I guess if I started at the beginning, I was very fortunate to have a father that took me hunting from a very young age, and he took me. I think I was 4 or 5. I remember him carrying me across rivers and creeks while we were out hunting. So even before I could hunt myself, I was out hunting with my father. And we didn't have Sunday gun hunting, so we'd spend the entire day Saturday hunting. And then the other fortunate thing for me is my grandfather had a dairy farm, which was just a few miles away. So I spent hours upon hours there. By then I had a pellet gun, and I was shooting pigeons and raising rabbits and I just there as much as possible. So most of my childhood, I really can't remember being inside. We only had 3 TV channels back then, so there wasn't much to watch on TV. So I very much, wandering the bushes of Southern Ontario and walking the creeks. And then I graduated into a shotgun, I guess, when I was 11. And that really taught me responsibility. My father would let me hunt with him, or I could go hunting on my own and shoot ducks at 11 years old. And life was all about being outdoors, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I think if we had stayed, I'm from Listowel, Ontario. I think if we'd stayed there, I probably would have become a conservation officer. But fortunately for myself, my father got transferred to Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, which is very close to the Delta Marsh, when I was 15. And then that really taught me about, large populations and migratory movements of waterfowl and migratory game birds and the importance of big marshes and the possibility of a career in conservation. So that move was really important to me. And then I got summer jobs. I started University of Winnipeg, and I got summer jobs at the Delta Marsh 4 years in a row, which really, working with older students, made me fully realize that I needed to do a master's and get a really cool job working with ducks. So and then I switched over to University of Guelph just because it was a better university for wildlife. And then for a couple of years, I worked for Ducks Unlimited, the Ministry of Natural Resources. And I always wanted to go to Africa. And I always thought, I better do it now before I get engaged or married, or I might never make it. So I met a professor from Africa while I was working at the Delta Marsh, and we made arrangements, and I went over and started working. And then I realized that insufficient amount of research had been done on arid and semi-arid breeding waterfowl. So I put in for a master's, completed that, and then was asked to upgrade to a PhD. And it was just a magical time. I think everybody that has an interest in the outdoors, whether they're hunters or not hunters, I think they should all go and see Africa. And if you're a hunter, you should definitely go and hunt Africa. And so I did lots of hunting while I was there. Played rugby for the full 5 years that I was there, and then came back and I got an absolutely fantastic job as the executive director of Long Point Waterfowl, doing research on ducks, geese, and swans, and teaching university in Southern Ontario. So I did that for 18 years. And then I became the CEO of Delta Waterfowl for a decade. And that involved me moving to Bismarck, North Dakota, where I'm currently located. And that got me up to, 58 years old and kind of thinking about my last hurrah. And of all the pillars, research and management and habitat conservation and what have you, R3 really stuck out to me as something that was really of critical importance. And we can talk more about that because I've seen huge changes in the university system, which certainly affects the R3 effort. And I thought, well, at now 59, I thought, you know what, this Outdoor Mentors CEO position came up, and it's remote, so I'm still living in Bismarck, North Dakota, and I thought I'm gonna try and get that job because that's where my interest when I was working for Delta. Despite we had four pillars, it was the R3 pillar and the University Hunt program that really attracted me the most because I really thought that that was probably where you could have the most long term impact on hunting in North America. So that's puts me where I am today. I'll probably work for Outdoor Mentors for 4 or 5 years. We'll talk about the expansion. I want to expand the heck out of it over the next 4 or 5 years, and then pass it off to somebody much younger than me and retire. So I'm excited about it.
If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're either thinking about hunting for the first time or trying to get better at it. Either way, you need to start with the right foundation. And that's why I'm so excited for the Evolving Hunter podcast to be partnering with CertifiedHunter.com. Certified Hunter offers state-approved online hunter education that's built for real people, not just test takers. You'll learn firearm safety, ethical decision-making, wildlife conservation, and what it actually means to be a responsible hunter in the field. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about checking a box. It's about showing up prepared, confident, and safe when the season opens. I didn't grow up hunting. I started later in life, and I can tell you firsthand that having clear, practical training makes a huge difference. Certified Hunter helps shorten the learning curve and sets you up to do this the right way from day one. So, if you're ready to take your first step into hunting, or you know someone who is, head to certifiedhunter.com/evolving hunter and get started today. Again, that's certifiedhunter.com/evolving hunter, and let's start the right way. I find it so interesting, particularly in speaking about motivations and pathways into hunting, that there can be such a spectrum, right? And that
Well, sure.
a lot of time is, me as a the quote unquote adult onset hunter started hunting, much later, didn't grow up in that world. And then talking with folks who really kind of started hunting because that's what mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, whoever the case, was in that person's life, that's what they
Yeah.
did. Right.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, folks who particularly who have made hunting and conservation not just something that they're interested in, but something that they dedicate their careers to. There had to have been at some point like a turning point as it relates to like where hunting and conservation became more than just something that you did and started really kind of shaping the direction of your life. So I'm sure there's not a single moment. I'm not going to ask you, can you pinpoint that moment, right? But can you maybe explore with me like the era in which that may have occurred?
Um, I would say like we moved to Manitoba when I was 15, and I wasn't really into academics all that much at that time, and so I'm sure that a PhD was the farthest thing from my mind, or an MSc, or maybe even a BSc. Um, but I knew I wanted to work with wildlife and thinking you're going to take over your grandfather's dairy farm is something that's highly unlikely that that's going to happen. So then that moved to Manitoba to be surrounded by massive numbers of ducks, geese, and swans and cranes, and just to see that incredible awakening in the spring, and that you don't really see it so much in southern Ontario because you've got there's probably a million right now, probably a million ducks, geese, and swans overwintering on the Great Lakes. So you see birds all winter. Whereas in Manitoba, when you see those first flocks of of geese coming over. It's like, wow, it's spring. And then you're inundated, and and you've got so many different species and the different behaviors and the different plumages and the different calls, and yeah, it was just amazing to me to see that, because coming from southern Ontario, where it had all been plowed under, very little public land, very few marshes, and then seeing other people making a go in wildlife conservation, and what it did was it taught me what I needed to do. And one was I needed to switch universities. Get University of Winnipeg's a good school, but it's not a good wildlife school. So I needed to get out of there and then get back to Ontario, and then from there do grad work. So I would say it was that move to Manitoba when I was 15 that the lights really turned on. That this was uh, I wanted to make my passion into my profession for sure. Yeah,
That's awesome. Um, so having grown up as a hunter, how did that influence perhaps the questions that you wanted to answer when you moved into like conservation, becoming a wildlife scientist?
sure. That's a great question. I really wanted to answer. It's like when I went to Africa and did my PhD there. I saw that worldwide very little bit had been done research wise on semi-arid and arid breeding waterfowl. So I wanted to answer questions that would make a difference, and not just a difference academically. I wanted to answer questions that would make a difference potentially in the management, and the regulatory procedures with respect to the species I was working on. So, and that worked out very well. I got, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 publications from my research in Africa. But even before that, working for Ducks Unlimited, and then afterwards doing research on the Great Lakes, I think my students and I must have published, I don't know, 70 or 80 peer reviewed scientific papers, and they were all pretty much applied. You know, and we did research on mourning doves because we wanted to get a mourning dove season, and we did, and just other applied aspects of, say, Phragmites and its impacts on bird abundance and things like that. And when you're um, soliciting the hunting community for support, they want to know that you're doing something that's useful. That's not going to just get stuck into a journal and never be seen again. They want to know that you're doing something that's potentially impacting them, and their future ability to hunt. Yeah,
So, this podcast is really centered around helping novice hunters, not just in actually getting out there and learning how to hunt, but also learning about conservation from the bigger picture. And so this next question is a little loaded because I've experienced this before, and I'm just trying to find a way to share it with the listeners. I'm really fortunate that I travel quite a bit around the US to talk about hunter education and education in our space in general, conservation education. And in those travels, I spend a lot of time with um, with folks who have that background in wildlife sciences and fisheries and these really broad backgrounds and of course you go to conferences and you go to there's always going to be some kind of outdoor component where we're going to go on a morning birding trip or we're going to do something and I remember being kind of blown away. Like my whole career up until getting into hunter education had been in outdoor education, like on the other side of outdoor ed and backpacking and canoeing and kayaking. And I felt very confident and knowledgeable about wild spaces and what I'm looking at. But going into the woods or the marshes or whatever with folks who had like dedicated their careers to studying these things, it was like, I don't know anything, right? Like to go out and they start, well, that's this and this is, oh, look at this means this. So
yeah.
that was all to say my question here. So for a new hunter that may be walking into a marsh or a wetland, what does a wildlife biologist see that others might miss? Does that question make sense?
Oh yeah,
It's
for sure.
a roundabout way to get
For
there.
sure, it makes sense. I certainly I did work with passerine small birds for a couple summers, and I did become a birder when I was in South Africa, because birding in South Africa is just so incredible. But then when I came back to North America, I was so busy with, having kids and everything else, I completely got away from the birding component. And but that didn't mean I didn't know things when I walked through the bush. It certainly is. It's much more satisfying, when you go through a marsh and you can identify the grebe species, and you can identify all the different aquatic birds, and a number of wetland dependent, non-aquatic birds, and some of the insects and some of the plants and what have you. It is satisfying, and knowing and seeing changes over time. And I think that that's where biologists, they really notice, deleterious impacts in the environment, but they also see changes, positive and negative changes over time. And one of the great things they have now is on your phone, for $35 a year, you can have a plant identifier and a bird identifier. And it makes some people think it's cheating, but I tell you, it's so informative. Uh, I was walking out from a turkey hunt with my nephew, and he picked up this feather, and he said, "You know what this is?" And I said, "I think it's a blue jay feather, but let me get my phone and I'll confirm it." And sure enough, it was a blue jay feather. So I felt great that I picked the right one. But it's also just, it really allows you to be that much more informed. And trying to go through a bird book or a plant book, that was, some of the most painful things I think that I ever did, especially a plant book. So yeah, but I think you see the scars, you see the deleterious events, especially if you've been hunting the same properties for year after year after year after year, and you slowly see the decline in the wetlands, or quickly see the decline and the reductions in bush cover. And so you certainly see the good and the bad. Yeah.
I think a couple years ago, my wife and I, we really enjoy birding, but we're in the spot that you explained a little earlier, where you start having kids.
Yeah.
When our daughter was first born, birding was the thing because we could throw her in the backpack and go birding. Now
Oh,
that
sure.
she's almost 4, that's not a thing, and so our birding is a little bit on a hiatus right now. It's, we could take her in the woods, but it's to, our focus is on keeping her from, hucking herself off a cliff into a river kind of a deal. So, uh, but, really, really enjoy birding. And then a couple years ago, I was in Florida with a group of people and ended up going birding with the Texas hunter ed coordinator at the time. His name was Steve Hall. He recently retired from Texas, but just a man that's a wealth of knowledge. And he and I went birding, and I felt pretty confident, in what I was doing. There was not a thing that fluttered by that he did not, I
Oh,
mean,
really?
instantly just have. And I was like, man, I was humbled a little bit on that day. Not that it's a competition, still, you like to feel like you know what you're doing, but um, that's really great. So for someone who may have never heard of Pass It On Outdoor Mentors, um, how would you describe the organization?
Sure. Well, Passive Outdoor Mentors was founded in 2002 through Mike Christensen, and in conjunction with Big Brothers and Big Sisters in Kansas. And I would say it was really formulated for two reasons. And we still we're expanding the organization. I'll talk about that. But we still have two very important reasons for doing what we do. One, as we know, with the R3 movement, it's more than just introducing kids, or introducing people to hunting. It's the whole protecting the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's making sure we've got excise tax money coming in. It's protecting what we do, and making sure people know the economic, ecological, and political importance of hunting. So, so one, we or they at the time saw the number of hunters declining, and wanted to contribute to increasing that or suppressing the decline. But the other one is, and I've got the book here, Last Child in the Woods, by Richard Louv, Louv, and he talks about nature deficit disorder. And you compare kids to, well, I told you what I did when I was a kid. Most kids don't do that anymore. In 1900, I think 40% of kids lived on farms. In 1990, 1.9% of kids lived on farms. And maybe living on a farm isn't the be all and end all, but I've always said that if much higher proportion of our population lived on farms, we would live in a better world. And there's just been this huge disconnect of kids from nature. And with nature deficit disorder, kids, they become more sedentary. They have health related problems. Some become obese. So it's really the denaturing of childhood. So it's really a two pronged approach, or two reasons for doing it. One is because the North American model, and we want to get more kids out hunting and fishing to protect what we do. But we also feel that kids need it. They're not getting outside and doing things. And if they are outside, they're generally on a soccer field or a football field or what have you. They're not recreating in nature. And half the time when they do recreate in nature, they're told that they shouldn't be doing that because it's dangerous, or the homeowners association doesn't want them to have a tree fort or what have you. So with that, that's how we get started. And so I guess, we were kind of almost a cottage industry in the state of Kansas for almost 20 years. And that's when Mike Christensen and others decided, you know what, this is a great model. And I'll talk about the model in a minute. Let's take it beyond Kansas. And so now we're in kind of 8 Midwestern US states. And I just met with the board last week, and it looks like we're probably going to embark on a campaign of trying to get into 40 states in 4 years. So 4 and 4, or 40 and 4. And because I really think it's going to take off. And with me being Canadian, I've seen lots of interest in us expanding into Canada. And what I would like to, if we're going to do it, I don't want to have two separate organizations. I want to have it one organization in both countries, one board of directors, and that we would raise money in both countries. And so the way we're different is we hire program coordinators, and the program coordinators set up the whole hunt. So, sometimes it's hard to be a mentor because it's hard to find kids. It's hard to find the places to take them. It's hard to set it up. And some people don't want to take kids to all their favorite hunting spots because you end up creating direct competitors. So our program coordinators, they find the kids, and sometimes that's difficult, because some states they're licensing kids to hunt, but then they don't have a mechanism to take them hunting. And I'm not going to mention the state, but one state in particular that we're working with, 30% of the kids that they get licensed never go hunting. So they can't give us the name of those kids, but they can give our name to those kids.
Mhm.
So there's lots of kids out there that want to hunt, but just don't have access to it. So the program coordinator finds the kids sign up online. The kids that come and hunt with us have to have a parent or a guardian with them, and just for lots of different reasons. And it works well that way. We don't do overnights. And then our program coordinator also finds the mentors, and the mentors sign up online. And we're very careful about who we take as mentors. We do background checks, which I don't know if anybody else does that. We try to find the right people that are going to be educational and safe, and be very careful with the kids, and be very informative. And then the program coordinator also sets up the location. So, because what you don't want to do is have a whole lot of turnover in your mentors. You want mentor retention. And by finding the kids for the mentor and finding the location for the mentor, it makes it much easier for them. And then we set up the dates, and they go hunting. And it works out very well. And the other thing that um, I the ways I think we're different is we allow the kids to come and hunt or fish at any number of times they would like. And because I think that if you take somebody hunting or fishing once, you didn't really mentor them. You introduced them. And the chances of a kid taking up hunting or fishing would be like if you took me golfing once, or mountain climbing once. That's just an introduction. You need to take them multiple times, and so that we really promote that they come out multiple times, and then they get to know their mentors, and they develop a real good rapport, a good relationship. And then the other thing is we hunt everything, because if you're an organization that only hunts ducks, you might only have 60 days a year or 90 days a year. Whereas for us, we when we're moving into a state, and I'll give you an example. We're really looking at Pennsylvania right now. One of our analytics guy, he takes a really hard look at that state as far as funding opportunities, partnership opportunities, hunting opportunities, access. And he came back and he says, that's a perfect state. He said, there's only 4 days in the entire year that we can't take a kid out hunting or fishing because they've got Sunday gun hunting and they get so many different forms of hunting.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't limit us to a very small portion of the year. So, we've had kids come out 2 dozen times. And by having them come out multiple times and have them do various forms of hunting and fishing, they can really pick and choose what they want. And I can tell you, I've been on both sides of it. You take a kid out in a $10,000 tender boat and a layout boat and $2,000 worth of decoys and sit out there all day. It can get a little boring, and it's also something, and it can get cold and they can get hungry, but it's also something that kid can't emulate, right? They can't go and do that on the next week. So I'm a firm believer in trying to keep it pretty simple. And so dove hunting simple. All my equipment fits in a small backpack. And same thing with turkey hunting. Turkey hunting's there's a lot to it. It's not the easiest hunt in the world, but it's simple with respect to equipment. And so getting kids out and, hey, even taking them squirrel hunting or pigeon hunting and just getting them out hunting and teaching them safety, the safety components and how to deal with landowners. And then they can kind of pick and choose because most hunters that we know don't hunt everything, right? I don't hunt everything. I've got certain things that I do hunt and certain things that I don't hunt. And that
Mhm.
gives them the opportunity to pick and choose what they're going to do. And it makes life a lot simpler for them. It's like, okay, well, next year I'm going to dove hunt. I'm going to buy dove decoys and I'm going to dove hunt next year. And then maybe the year after that, they think, I think I'm going to take up predator hunting or whatever. And so eh, it's a thorough introduction for kids that want a thorough introduction so they can come out several times over several years. There's no age lower limit really. They have to have a license. But for fishing, we're not taking 4-year-old kids out or anything, but we'll take 8 or 10-year-old kids out. And then our upper limit's generally 22 years old. So yeah.
Hey folks, Jay here. Just taking a short break from the show to let you know about something that I am really excited about. My first few times chasing turkeys, I wasn't learning. I was just repeating the same mistakes, but just in different woods. Hearing birds, getting close, and then blowing it without really knowing why. That can be a really frustrating part about turkey hunting. It's not always obvious what you're doing wrong. As you know, we are proudly partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. Their hunter education course is designed to help you learn how to safely get out into the woods as a hunter with confidence. But they've also just started developing courses to help you learn more about hunting specific species. I had the honor to help them to develop their newest course called Turkey Hunting Fundamentals. This online course is designed to help bring clarity to turkey hunting. How birds move, how to set up on them, when to push, when to sit tight. All that stuff can actually really change outcomes. So, if you're new or if you're just tired of guessing, I promise you it's worth your time. If you want to check it out, go to certifiedhunter.com/courses to get started. All right, let's jump back into the show.
And
I think it's really interesting. One of the things you pulled out there is the perception of being in the woods, right? Being a part, going into a wilderness environment. There's a excuse me. There's a great book. It was a book I actually had to read in undergrad, and I didn't really appreciate it then. But now that I've gotten older, I've read it a few times since then. But it's called "Wilderness in the American Mind." But it kind of looks at the perception of wilderness over time and how that has shifted from, and at one point, it was almost like, it was, wilderness is very dangerous, and then it was wilderness was very, a comforting homecoming kind of a thing, and I do think about it a lot, looking, not that I wanna be the guy sitting there like, "Youth today," or, you know, but there has been a shift, like, even in my generation, like, you're home for the summer, you you went outside in the morning and you came inside when it was time for dinner.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for
It's
sure.
kind of a
Yeah.
thing. You had your BMX bike and your brother, your sister, your friends around the neighborhood, and that was the thing. But, I am curious about, as we get down the road, we start to identify how the perception of wilderness or just outdoor spaces has shifted as generations have changed and progressed. I think about that's a topic I probably think more on than I think I should. I'm just fascinated by it, right? Because wilderness is a constant; it hasn't really changed, but the people that interact with it have changed a lot,
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
over time. So
And
really,
a lot of them, somebody might say, "Oh, I spend a lot of time in the outdoors," or I guess I do a lot of mountain biking, and I don't consider that really outdoor time. I consider that I'm recreating in the outdoors, but I'm not looking at birds. I'm not listening to birds. I'm listening to music. I'm getting exercise in the outdoors. It's not the
mm,
same as going birding or going hunting or what have you. Kayaking maybe a little different, if you're out there for leisure, and if you're camping and what have you, that certainly does uh, qualify in my mind more for spending quality time in the outdoors that does counteract nature deficit disorder. Yeah.
for sure. So, what do you see as uh, the the most common barriers for youth, or those first time hunters coming um, into pass it on?
Well, we've got very good data sets. And we've got one of our guys who's a program coordinator. As soon as I came on, he was already collecting lots of data, and he's great at Excel sheets and all that kind of stuff. And I think data is key if you're going to really find out what you're achieving, and if you want to fix any problems that could be happening as if it's access issues or what have you. You really need to have questionnaires, pre-hunt and post-hunt questionnaires for mentors and mentees. And so, and it's really, there's a number of things that the kids pointed out, and lots of them did point it out. And the top one was lack of access, and that really varies by state and province. Like say, and species as well. Say you want to duck hunt in Louisiana, well, you're going to have an access issue. You really are. Whereas if you want to go pheasant hunting in North Dakota, you don't really have an access issue because there's so much public land, and there's so much of what they call Plutz land. That's private land open to sportsmen. So the government pays landowners to allow hunters on their property. But overall, access is an issue. And next one is not knowing where to go. Because as I say, there's lots of plots land here in North Dakota, but if you don't have OnX, and if you don't have a vehicle, or you don't know unless you go out with somebody where to go, because not all plots lands are created equal either. And next one's a lack of knowledge or skill, and you can only learn so much in a classroom. The other one's lack of people to go with, and lack of gear, and then unsure of regulations. So, and that's where we're really happy that we've asked all these questions, because we know that all of those five or six barriers to entry, or barrier to going second, third, fourth time, we can handle all those through our program coordinators and our mentors. And what happens is kids just become more and more confident all the time that okay, I know that I can go hunting these places and these places, and I get this there, and I don't really need nearly as much gear as the magazine said I needed. You know, especially if you're going to hunt, some of the more simplistic things like doves or what have you. You don't need that much gear, and so those tend to be the barriers. And the first barrier is, I think, though, just making the decision that you want to hunt, and then going and getting your license. So contact your state, um, and get your license. But then even after you've got your license, there's barriers because, as I said, one of the states we're working with, 30% of licensed children or adolescents, they never ever go hunting. And but I can see it. I went in North Dakota. I went and got my trapping license, and I asked a few people to mentor me, and they said that they wouldn't. I can't really blame them. And I never trapped, but I'm still glad I took the course because I've got a better appreciation for trapping. Doesn't mean I won't trap at some time in my life, but there's a critical time there when a kid gets licensed. You want to get them out in the field as soon as possible after that. And again, it's hard for them to go on their own, and it's hard for them to satisfy or overcome all those barriers on their own.
Absolutely, and those barriers you mentioned, they're not just the barriers for kids, they're the barriers for all new
Sure.
hunters,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, there's been a lot of studies that have occurred that look at different, uh look at barriers, I guess, from different lenses or from different perspectives, but they all kinda come back to be that general list, right? Of and ultimately, it comes down to access, not just physical access, which is certainly a big part of it, but, access to equipment, access to help, access to, to, to locations to hunt, uh, and even down to, like, um, access to ideas that are complementary to hunting, right? Like, if you've never met a hunter in your entire life, right, and you decide you wanna be a hunter, that's a huge uphill battle for sure, regardless if you're a kid or an adult or whatever the case may be, to kinda have that possibility. So, one of the things I'm curious about with Pass It On, um, well, I guess first let's jump into you mentioned you wanting to expand, Pass It On. You mentioned the 40 and 4. Could you kinda talk more about what your intentions are or your plans for, expanding the offerings of Pass It On?
Sure. Well, we're not really looking. Well, we do have other offerings, like we do mentor kids, but also our program coordinators. They will give you an example. We've got a relationship, a great relationship with the state of Wisconsin, and so there's kind of a laundry list of things that we deliver. Yeah, our three type events that we deliver or at least organize for the state, and then with that we get an annual stipend, which helps pay for our program coordinator. So things like game cleaning clinics or butchering clinics, shooting clinics, and things like that. So, because that certainly is part of the mentoring process, because you get a kid that shoots a deer, most of them don't know how to deal with it, and they just need some support in that way. But overall, so we're pretty much in the Midwest right now. Say from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. We're hoping to be moving into Nebraska soon. We are in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and again we're looking at Pennsylvania. So we're kind of organically growing, kind of mid continent. And because what happens is when you've got, say, a program coordinator in Kansas, that person delivers primarily in Kansas, but they also prospect out and arrange hunts in neighboring states, which is a little harder to do because you're not in that state. But then once we get to a critical mass in that neighboring state, um, then maybe Nebraska. Then, and once we have enough funding, then we would hire another program coordinator in that state, and that's when it can really take off. And we had two program coordinators in Kansas, and we're delivering 800 events per year in that state. That's kind of the epicenter for us. So there's that kind of organic growth mid continent, but then there's opportunistic growth where we had a foundation come to us. It's a foundation that I'd worked with in the past in Pennsylvania. And we've got some really good relationships with major donors and with the state. And so we opportunistically will pick states like Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and then start delivering in those states, and then hopefully the funding that comes in, we try to have it set that it comes with there's enough money that comes in that we can hire a program coordinator, because getting a full-time program coordinator in the state is really what results in that state taking off, because that's generally you hire somebody from the state. They know the state. They know the major players. They can help the rest of our staff raise money to make the state self-sufficient. They know where to find the youth. They know where to find the mentors, and they know where to send people hunting. So so it's, again, organic growth, but opportunistic growth as well. And
For
as far
sure.
as Canada, if we go into Canada, we have to get Canadian Revenue Agency approval first, and that takes a bit of time. So we're not really concentrating too heavily on that one right now. I'd like to get some financial support from Canadian donors to help us with that exercise, and then we would opportunistically move into a couple provinces. Yeah.
That's great. I think, well, we mentioned research, a few questions ago, and um, the the research time and time again within our industry illustrates that mentorship is the key to creating new hunters, essentially, and and partly because we've talked on the show before about the outdoor recreation adoption model, which is a model that is used throughout the hunting industry that kind of illustrates how you can help someone move from interested in hunting to becoming like a self-sufficient, like they are hunters, right? They have that identity, they feel like they're a hunter, that sort of side. And there's several steps that the all of the state R3 agencies in the U.S. and a lot of NGOs utilize to help to facilitate that progression. But over all of it, right, sits the umbrella of community, of belongingness, of all of those things. And so that really is I think the primary reason why mentorship is seen as like the golden key, right? Because it allows for this like relationship based model of bringing people into hunting. However, I think one of the things that state agencies and NGOs alike run into with relationship-based model, bringing people in, is that it's incredibly difficult to scale when you're talking about one-on-one relationships. So, what is your approach to scale something that's as personal as mentorship?
Well, one of the ways it does scale is by well, I'll back up. I just read a paper. I can't remember what it was called, but it was to do with salmon fishing in Atlantic Canada. And it was an R3 type paper, and it discussed the decline in the number of salmon fishermen. And it was interesting. They said that early adopters are the ones that tend to be the most conservation oriented, and the ones and I take that a step further. I think early adopters are also the ones that are more likely to take on a career in wildlife conservation, and we need more hunters and fishermen to establish careers in conservation, because lots of non-hunters and anti-hunters establish careers in conservation, and that can sometimes be deleterious. Uh, so and some people argue that, oh no, we should be introducing adults because they've got the time, they've got the means, they've got this, they've got that, and I don't disagree. I think that there's so many state agencies and nonprofits that are involved in R3 right now. I don't think we should be really pointing fingers and saying, this is the be all and end all. I think that the scale is the fact that pretty much every state is an R3 coordinator. Most of our NGOs are doing it, and we're all doing it a little bit differently. We might sound braggadocious about the way we do it, but we have to defend it, and we like the way we do it. And I like the early adoption model, and getting these kids thinking about a lifetime in the woods, a lifetime in the marsh, and hopefully with some of them a lifetime, a career in conservation. And so, yeah, it tends to be one or two or three or four kids at a time. However, a lot of these young kids, they become influencers, and and I think more so than adults, because they go home and they tell their family and they tell their friends, and they become ambassadors for the sport. And I can't remember where I read it, but each not every kid becomes an influencer or an ambassador, but the ones that do can certainly influence up to 10 other people in their time of I don't know if it's through their lifetime, but I think over the next decade or so they can influence quite a number of people. So that's when it starts to scale, because and the good thing there is you've got your various numbers. 10% of the population's anti-hunting, 10% of the population's hunting, but that's declining, and 80% of the population doesn't really care. But I do think that, and the 10% that are anti-hunting, you're probably not going to influence them. But certainly, I think these influencers and ambassadors are influencing a lot of people that might have never thought of hunting. And then they're like, wow, I never thought about just how critically important, again, ecologically, economically, and politically, how important hunting really is. And I can tell you, if it wasn't for hunting in North America right now, like we didn't have overabundance when I was a kid in the 1970s when I first started hunting, but we have overabundance now. My car is in the shop right now getting fixed from the white-tailed deer I ran into a couple of weeks ago. And when I drove back from Ontario, there was dead deer everywhere. And so we've actually become a very important tool for keeping populations in check. And if all of a sudden we didn't have deer hunting, it would become uneconomical to farm in large portions of North America, or otherwise we'd have to have governments out spending huge amounts of our taxpayers' dollars culling these animals. And it just makes so much more sense to have us paying for the opportunity to do so. And but anyways, that's a long drawn out answer to it. It we're not going to do it on our own. We do like our model. I do like the early influencers. I do like the fact that our mentors talk to these kids about the North American model. They talk to them about overall conservation, and they talk to them about careers in conservation. And I think that that lasts a lifetime, you know. And you introduce somebody that's 35 or 40, they're probably not going to change their career. They're probably not going to quit golfing and quit everything else they do in their life, and start hunting 24/7 or whatever. But I think the multi-pronged approach that the overall R3 movement is doing right now is good, and that's what it's going to take. And then people talk about creating competition. I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but I don't think that we're ever going to get to the point that we're creating more hunters than we're losing, right? So, and there's lots of ways to reduce competition, both broadly and individually. So I really don't have any concerns in that regard.
Yeah. No, that's a topic that comes up time and time again.
Yeah,
I've done several episodes that are just R3 based, like, exploring what R3 is, what it's
yeah,
doing in conservation, etcetera. And, I know when I hit publish on those episodes that, my inbox is gonna, catch some very interesting but appreciated, perspectives on the idea of creating competition. And, and I don't want 100s at my spot, that kind of thing. And really, it's not necessarily. It comes down to preserving the experience, that a lot of people are concerned with, um, and yeah, I think I've said it a lot, so I'm almost like a broken record, right? But the idea that our the amazing conservation system that we have in the US is 100% participation based. So if you like what we have, you gotta be okay and even be supportive of additional participation,
sure. Yeah,
because that, it all rides on it. right? From license sales to, Pittman Robertson dollars, all those things.
for sure.
It rides on it. Yeah.
Y you look at the difference now between, again, 50 years ago, like, lots of places didn't have Sunday gun hunting 50 years
Yeah.
ago, and adding Sunday gun hunting for lots of people, it doubled their opportunity to hunt because they work Monday to Friday, and I think of where I hunted as a kid, there were no wood ducks, there were no Canada geese, there were no sandhill cranes, there were 0 wild turkeys, and there's a huge, contingent of people hunting wild turkeys now. And in that portion of Ontario, there were no deer hunts because there was hardly any deer. And so the good old days really are now. And I would say that the people that we're introducing to hunting at this point in time aren't the ones that are pulling up to, the docks in Louisiana and getting in the lineups. And those are your hardcore hunters that have been around for a long time. And I don't think we're adding to that confusion or congestion. And I don't know, for me, hunting's really about tranquility. I don't like going out and sitting in a field with 10 other people, snow goose hunting. I'd rather be with 2 or 3 or 4. And I don't like congestion, and I don't like competition, but what I do is I just avoid it. I've hunted for long enough, I know how to avoid it. Maybe don't go turkey hunting at opening day on a Saturday. At first thing in the morning, I've shot lots of turkeys at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mhm.
And sometimes you just need to adjust your activities accordingly. And if you've got a few landowners that you're looking after, then that's another way to reduce competition because you've got permission and you've got a really good relationship with a landowner that's they might not let you on to deer hunt, but if they're letting you on to turkey hunt, you can manage competition in that regard.
Absolutely. One of the things that, it particularly strikes me about Pass It On is the idea of, uh, not cutting people off. Right? Where you come to one event, okay, you're done. That's not the model. You come to one event, okay, when are you coming to another one, kind of a model. Because I think if, to relate that back to the idea of R3 is that we're we put a lot of focus on recruitment. We're pretty good as an industry at R1ing, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, but the retaining and reactivating, in this case, retaining is quite difficult, and I think that's where a lot of state agencies also have difficulty in scaling, because a lot of their goal is to get as many people through, their, Hunt 101 program as they
Yeah.
can, to kinda I'm not gonna say count that as an impact, but to have that touch on that person and hope that they persist, right? Where a program like yours, the idea is to actually have that consistent contact so as to help them to make that transition and build that confidence. So I think that it can make a really huge difference, from an R3 perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm glad you agree because we're proud of it, and yeah, the one and done it doesn't work well, and it at all. We know that data shows it, and especially if you're taking them out to do some form of hunting, again that they can't emulate on their own. You know, I do think that the United States is doing a very good job with the retention component a really good job. The
Mhm.
funding model in the US is second to none, and I know it's second to none because 'cause I'm from Canada, where if you wanna go and sight your rifle in, or find public land to hunt, unless you're living in the far north, it's very, very, very hard to find, especially in a very crowded province like Ontario. And with Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson and all kinds of other funding pots, I think that the I do think the U.S. is doing a good job with respect to retention. There's lots of opportunities for hunting. Again, the good old days are now. I think other than waterfowl regs, I think the waterfowl regs are far too convoluted. Whereas most other regs are pretty simple, and easy to figure out. And so, and if we can't deal with retention, then you might as well throw recruitment out the window because you can't retain the hunters you have. You're not going to recruit new ones because if your current hunters aren't happy, your new hunters aren't going to be happy. That's for sure.
Yeah. I am really glad, though, to see a bit of a shift in the focus on varying motivations of hunting, right? Where I feel, in the early R3 days, when before it was R3 even, right, was, um, it was just about general hunting, right? Play your part in conservation, become a hunter. That sort of messaging, and now it's starting to really, to have marketing for specifically for those who are interested in, the local vor kind of movement, or those that
Sure.
are
Yeah.
interested in this, that, and the other. And I think that's easy. Anytime you can better relate to people, the more it's going to appeal to them. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
to see that shift a bit more. But
It's
so I,
interesting. Further to that, we used to teach a water bird ecology course in Ontario, and it there was a lot of vegetarians in that class, and we had to cook accordingly because we were with them for a week, but we had some excellent game chefs that were teaching the course, and we would cook just these delectable wild game meals. And I don't know how many vegetarians I saw convert, and because it was for them, it was an animal husbandry thing. And obviously, there's no animal husbandry involved with hunting, and they liked the fact when we explained that all these animals lived a very humane existence up until the time they were harvested, and a lot of them took up. They said they will continue to not eat domestic meat, but they'll be acquiring game meat anyway and anyhow they can. Yeah. So
that's great.
it
Yeah.
is fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry I interrupted.
No, no worries. I kinda wanna jump into the sort of the logistical side for listeners. So I'm I don't I do get the metrics for my podcast, right? I know the general demographic of those that listen. Not many kids are listening to my podcast. So I do want to, kinda jump in, like, for a parent listening, who may want, uh who may have a kid that's interested in hunting. What can they do to support them as a parent?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, and if they don't hunt themselves, if they hunt themselves, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If they don't hunt themselves and their child wants to hunt, there's still lots of great ways or avenues for those kids to take up hunting. I would start by contacting the state and finding a way for them to get licensed. Um, but also, there's various nonprofits that have youth groups and maybe they want to join the committee for the local rough grouse society to help put on the dinner and that kind of thing because those volunteer hours look absolutely fantastic on a resume. Plus, you meet the I hate to say the cream of the crop, but you're meeting the people that are really giving back to the resource, whether it be NWTF or any of the nonprofits that have fundraising dinners. It's really rewarding, both personally and then ultimately professionally, because they get their name on a resume. And then you can meet people that way. And I met a guy online this year. I went on looking for advice on elk hunting on North Dakota big game hunting. And this young guy, young relative to me, he's 27. He said, "Hey, I got a tag in the same unit as you. Do you want to meet out there and hunt together?" He had a bull tag and I had a cow tag, and we hunted together. We became very good friends. And then mentored him. He'd never turkey hunted before. So I took him out opening day turkey hunting, and in the first 15 minutes he shot a Jake, and he was as happy could be. And I guess you want to be careful about meeting people online, but there are, especially if you're a child, but there are ways to meet people, but again, I would start with the state. I would talk to some NGOs, find some maybe the parent has other friends that hunt that they could tag along with, and then go from there. And again, as I said, keep it simple in the first couple of years, and there's lots of things that you can go and hunt. that um, it's easy to get permission to go predator hunting or like here in North Dakota, it's easy. Not in Texas, it's not easy to find a place to dove hunt, but here in North Dakota it is, and it's easy to find a place to turkey hunt here. And then again, look after your landowners and but finding a friend that's either going through the same thing as yourself, learning, or somebody that's been even into it for a couple of years that you can hunt with and develop a relationship with is always nice. And so there's various resources. There's lots of resources online as well. So, but yeah, I just as a parent, I'd want to, and that's the nice thing about outdoor mentors is the youth have to have a guardian, and we're really proud of that. And the other thing that does is it often gets the parent interested as well. And if you can get parent interested, then you've really come full circle
Mhm.
because then all of a sudden they're going to take it up, and then they're going to learn and do it together. And I can tell you, with my father, he mentored me for years. It took me hunting for years, and the last 10 years of his life, I mentored him because he couldn't go by himself. He just passed away a couple of years ago, but the whole last decade of his life, um, right down to his clothing, I looked after it, his decoys and everything else, and his turkey tent and all that kind of stuff. So um, it, it the relationships, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that you establish via hunting, either being your best buddies or, in my case, my two brothers. We've got nothing in common. They're police officers in Toronto. We got nothing in common. But I just spent a week turkey hunting with them in Ontario. We had the best time ever. And because of hunting, we're incredibly good friends, and we hunt whenever we can. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to get involved, and especially if you've got parents that are accepting and helpful. Yeah, or an aunt or an uncle or whoever, but finding somebody that can help you along the way is certainly going to be very helpful. And if you're in any of the 8 states where we're delivering, you could certainly look up outdoor mentors online, and we'll get you out with some of our mentors and your guardian.
That's great. So, for those listeners who may be experienced hunters and are, curious or open to mentoring, particularly if they're in the one of those 8 states, how could those mentors get involved with outdoor mentors if they're interested?
Yeah, they simply go to the Pass It On Outdoor Mentors website. That's going to change probably. We're going through a rebranding process right now that we're going to change our logo, and we're going to at least shorten our name. We might change it, but we're probably going to get rid of the Pass It On portion of it because it's kind of long. But definitely go to the Pass It On Outdoor Mentors website, and you'll see where you can sign up as a mentor and ask you some questions. And then we do the background check, and we say to mentors, we give them the opportunity to pay for their background check, but they don't have to. If they don't want to, we'll pay for it. And once they've passed their background check, they can let us know. They can sign up what dates are available, where they're available, what types of things they would like to hunt, and then we, um, for lack of a better term, marry up the youth with the mentors and their guardians, and then they figure out the date and they go for a hunt, and or hopefully several hunts.
So, to become a mentor, do they have to be I feel like I know the answer to this question. I'm kinda leading it. It's really for listeners. So, if I to become a mentor, do you have to be like an absolute pro hunter?
No, and I
Yeah.
don't think we most pro hunters are I don't think we have any pro hunters that are mentors. Maybe we do. I'm not sure, but yeah, no. And even if they're only a second year hunter, then they can learn together. But as long as that person's over 22 years of age and willing to talk to them about conservation and make sure that everything is incredibly safe. And yeah, no, we don't expect major amounts of experience. It's more the personality and the safety factor and the willingness to spend time with somebody usually younger than yourself and show them the ropes and spend time with their guardian as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common misconception I feel for a lot of mentors that they
Oh
feel
yeah.
like they're not ready, right, to become a
Oh
mentor.
no.
But
No.
if you know, a a moderate amount, you know a lot more than a beginner, and
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
that the opportunity to help is still there if you're
yeah.
interested in helping others.
Well, and we're
So
all quite close. Like, I don't know all the mentors for sure, but Dan Stark was Mentor of the Year for Kansas about 3 or 4 years ago, and he's well, just gives you an idea of the age bracket because we've got some mentors that are in their early 20s, and he is, I think, 75,
well,
and he came here and stayed overnight, and we had dinner, and all we talked about was how like his farm, he's got a 150-acre farm, and he just can't get enough kids because he lives out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and he just wants to take more kids hunting, and it's fantastic. He just absolutely loves it. So yeah, there's you know there's no restrictions on age, and even if somebody's you know, can't walk 10 miles in a day, that's fine. You don't need to walk 10 miles if you're just going out to a turkey tent or a dove blind or whatever. So, and we do provide, if our mentor doesn't have all the necessary equipment, we'll certainly provide the equipment as well.
I feel like it's a pretty consistent story. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of mentors over the years, and I I understand one side of making a decision to mentor and that you're potentially giving up part of your season. And in certain states, right? Some states have, just youth firearm season, right? In which case you couldn't hunt anyways. I get that side of the tale, but I've also seen time and time and time again hunters who have decided to pass on their knowledge to new hunters, and you ask them questions about their experience of mentoring, and every time, without fail, their face just lights up,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah,
they have these amazing experiences, and it almost creates additional depth and additional richness to their hunting because, they now get to experience those firsts really again with someone that they've invested in, so,
for
uh,
sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Especially as you develop a relationship with that mentee, and you really like this person and you really want them to have success. And it's kind of like when I used to take my kids hunting when they were young. Like now, I'm not really mentoring them anymore. We go out as men, but or when I take my wife hunting, she doesn't hunt very often. I just absolutely love seeing her shoot something. I shot enough stuff in my life, and so, yeah, or that 27-year-old young man that I took out and he got his first turkey, and he was just beaming from ear to ear. There's just so much joy in that. And, maybe some people don't get joy out of that, but lots do. And those are the ones that, some of our mentors of the year, they're taking kids out constantly, and which is absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, what does Pass It On need most right now?
Well, everybody needs money,
There
and
you go.
we'll come
Yeah,
back to that. We'll come back to that. But well, we need access to more kids, and we're working on that through. And we've only got 8 staff right now, right? So we're building. I just hired a development director and a regional director, and what we're going to do is hire fundraisers and hire program people, and expand out at the same time. We also need to hire an HR person. We're really bare bones, which means we're pretty frugal. We're not spending huge amounts of money. We don't have any bricks and mortar. Everybody works from home. But so what we need as far as programmatic delivery is we need access to more kids signing up, and you know how kids are, they're so busy. They also sometimes they sign up and then they cancel. And we understand. But more kids, and especially in the states we're in, plus the states we're moving in, we need more mentors as well. And I think as we get more kind of a bigger name or better name or more market share, and more respect, we'll get more of both because other folks and state agencies will help us. And then the other thing we need is access to land. So I guess there's 3 types of places we hunt. We will hunt public land, and but we're making sure that we're doing it in such a fashion that we're not seen as creating a whole bunch of competition. We do hunt some like put and take pheasant farms because we've had some of our industry or endemic corporate folks give us money specifically to buy pheasants for to go to these pheasant farms. And so that in that case, we might have two mentors and four kids, and we'll go out and we'll put out 15 pheasants or whatever, and that guarantees success, which is fantastic. And we do that a fair bit. And largely because we're getting money earmarked for that. And then the other place we hunt is some private land. And and again, I don't think we're creating competition because often if we go knocking on a door, if it was an adult looking to hunt deer on a property, they would say, "Well, no, I hunt my own deer." Yeah, you're. But if we say, we're mentoring this youth, there's only one gun. Can we come on and hunt doves, or can we hunt turkeys? Can we hunt predators? Can we hunt squirrels? And then whatever they tell us we can hunt, we'll go and hunt. And the one thing that we've been very successful at, and it's absolutely fantastic, and I wish I would have had these kind of opportunities when I was a kid, is when we go to these big properties, thousands of acres that are specifically groomed for deer hunting, and say we've got these youth that we're mentoring. Do you mind if we come on and shoot some of your does? And they're like, okay, you've got a guardian, you've got a mentor, and you've got a kid learning to hunt, and I've got too many does. and, and then and they've got feeders and beautiful blinds. And so for the mentor, it's great because they get onto properties that they would normally never get on. And plus the kid, some of these kids, what did somebody say? Just recently, one of the kids said, "This is so fantastic. Now we're going to have meat in our hamburger helper."
Wow.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
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 An entire deer to take home to the family, which is huge. And then the other thing that we figured out is that we can actually give those landowners, and especially where we're going deer hunting, we offer them a tax receipt. And it's written out. We don't put the amount in. It's up between them and their accountant. And that really interests a lot of people as well. So not only can they know it's well organized, they know it's safe, they know it's a kid, they know they're getting rid of some does on their property that they don't feel like killing, and then they also get a tax receipt. So and then these kids, because the nature of the properties, they're highly successful, and they're not sitting out there for 4 days to shoot a doe. They generally get one each time they go. So it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it's
That sounds
well, and
great.
I never thought of it till now. I hope we're not spoiling them.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but for them to be able to take an entire deer home to their family is pretty cool. Yeah.
absolutely,
And
for
so
sure.
so so we need access to land, we need mentors, we need kids. Everybody needs money. So I did just hire a development director, and he's really going for corporations and foundations and major donors. And then we've Mike Christensen works a lot on grants, and we could and I hired another guy, regional director for putting on events. And so a lot of our kind of endemic corporate, like Savage and lots of these other organizations, they'll give us product for dinners or product for our gun of the week draw and what have you. And so every time we move into a new state, like I don't think anybody in New Hampshire is going to give us any money right now because we're not delivering program in New Hampshire, or even in where in several states, in um, Florida. We got a one hunt there next year, but we're not trying to raise money there because we're not delivering there. But as soon as we move into a state, when we kind of hit that critical threshold, we got state money or we got a major donor gave us money, and then we've got a full time employee, then we can really go after corporations and foundations and what have you. And the other thing I'm think well, if not think I'm proud of, and I think is going to be helpful, is that 97% of what people give to or to philanthropically is they give to the church or they give to human related causes like Cancer Society or what have you. Only 3% goes to conservation. 3%, which is so that it's a pretty small pie that we're all kind of fighting over. And so we are going obviously after conservation dollars. We call it corporate endemic or foundational endemic. But we're also able to go after corporate non-endemic because corporations have these social responsibility dollars that they all pretty much have to give out every year. And the way we sell it is we've got all these kids that are having a nature deficit disorder, which causes health related problems, and they're not going outside and yada yada yada. And it's not lying. It's we're selling that we're we're doing it to try and give these kids opportunities to be better people, I guess, or be healthier, or what have you. And we're using hunting and fishing and other outdoors experiences in order to counteract that. And that's exactly what this Last Child in the Woods book is pushing for. So we're what we're trying to do, I guess, is make the conservation pie bigger by not just taking the money we're raising from that 3%, we're taking it from that 97%. And and hopefully that's going to work, but time will tell. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to hear of the growth so far and the plans for continued growth in this space. It's great. Well, thank you, Scott, so much for agreeing to spend some time and have a conversation with me today on the Evolving Hunter podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it was great to be able to spread the word about what we're doing, and hopefully we can expand substantially and throughout the country and make a difference. So thanks for giving the opportunity to tell people and yourself about what we do.
Absolutely. So if a listener wanted to learn more, could they or reach out to you, they could go to the passonoutdoormentors.org. Is that the web address to find you?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I'll
and
make sure to include that in the show notes as
yeah.
well. So if you're listening to this episode and you're driving your car or can't write something down, it will be in the show notes for you to find
Okay,
as a link.
you can
So
put up my email address too if you'd like. It's up to you. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'll grab that from you. I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
Excellent. Okay.
Uh, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who's thinking about getting into hunting, or maybe someone that you'd like to start hunting with. I'd also love to hear from all of you listening to the show. If you have questions or comments, please send them in at community@evolvinghunter.com. That's community@evolvinghunter.com. Any questions you send in, we'll do our best to answer them live on the show, or maybe I'll just respond to you via email. We can only put so many questions on a show. Uh, we do have a upcoming show that will be just questions and answers. I have a significant debt of questions sitting in my inbox, and I love to get back to listeners as quickly as I can. So be on the lookout for that episode upcoming. If you want to follow along, make sure that you're subscribed to the Evolving Hunter podcast. We're on Instagram and YouTube at Evolving Hunter Podcast, all one word. We've got more conversations and hunting stories coming, along with practical conversations about skills, ethics, and what it takes to grow as a hunter. So please stick with us, follow along. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep evolving. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. One last thing before you go. If you're thinking about getting into hunting, before you go and buy gear or plan a hunt, you need the right foundation. That's why we're so excited to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. They have state-approved online hunter education that teaches real-world safety, ethics, and responsibility, not just test answers. If you want to start hunting the right way, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolvinghunter and get certified today.